Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to the Temple Institute Parsha class. My name is Gedalia Meyer, and I'm podcasting from Ma'ale Adumim in Israel. The human mind works in strange ways. All anyone has to do to demonstrate this obvious fact of life is a little introspection. Upon even the briefest amount of gazing in the imaginary mental mirror, we clearly see evidence that a certain amount of what we think or speak or do bears no resemblance to what can be called rational or logical. We might blurt something out that strikes both ourselves and those who have to hear it as absolutely crazy. We might do something that is simply ridiculous by anybody's standards, even our own. And don't get me started on thoughts. These thankfully private flashes of both insight and insanity reveal to us how utterly maniacal we can be at times. The fact that nobody else is privy to these thoughts probably serves as an impetus for thinking them to begin with. When nobody's looking inside our minds, it's open season for craziness. It's probably a safe bet that if our thoughts were fully revealed at any given time to anybody who wanted to see them, we would all be labeled stark raving mad. But thank God, these thoughts remain private and completely our own, and we don't have to worry about anybody poking around in our dungeons and hidden chambers and discovering what's really going on in there. Perhaps God knows about this mental baggage, but at least nobody who really counts can take us to task for it. We are thus able to dismiss all of this as if it never happened, because it's our own private world and nobody else's business. We all know, of course, that this license we grant ourselves extends beyond things that are forever hidden within the confines of the mind. It even goes to things that may be witnessed by others, but by some stroke of good fortune simply isn't. We get away with stuff like this all the time and thank our lucky stars that nobody caught us with our hand in the cookie jar. These things also, however guilty we might really be, can easily be dismissed as if they never happened. We might carry some guilt around for a while, but this too shall pass. It is really only when we actually get caught in the act that we feel the need to apologize or to somehow account for our previously hidden guilt. These moments might be awkward since we have to admit to something that we had hoped would escape the scrutiny of others, but such is life. As Albert Einstein once said, after doing one of these blunders in a public forum, quote, "We all have to make sacrifices at the altar of stupidity from time to time." This also is life, making fools of ourselves and being forced to face our own inadequacies. This week's Parsha is called Vayikra. That word means, quote, "and he called," a reference to God calling out to Moshe in the tabernacle to convey to him some essential prophetic idea. This word is not only the name of the Parsha, but also the name of the third book of the Torah, Leviticus. The Greek or Roman name for the book is based on the original Jewish title, which was Torah Kohanim, or Laws of the Priests. It happens that a good deal of this book deals with exactly that subject, so this was the appropriate title. Nevertheless, Jews now know this book by that word Vayikra and not by the more familiar Leviticus. This Parsha, much like the book, deals with the sacrificial offerings that were brought in ancient Israel. In pre-tabernacle times, these offerings were brought at private altars that could be built almost anywhere. With the construction of the tabernacle, the bringing of sacrifices was restricted to one place only. This centralization of worship was meant to unify the ancient Israelites into one people with one system of belief and ritual. When the Israelites came to the Holy Land, the tabernacle was first situated in the ancient central region called Shiloh. At some point, this shrine was destroyed and was replaced by the central temple in Jerusalem. In reality, the evidence from the Bible shows that the centralization of ritual worship was probably very rarely actually practiced. There were likely always private altars being built and employed for personal needs. There were even rival temples to the one in Jerusalem, which probably had similar systems of offerings to God. Nevertheless, in Jewish lore and tradition, the temple in Jerusalem has always remained the single place that had ever deserved official sanctified status, and all the others are seen as cheap imitations. Our parsha describes many of the offerings that were brought on the central altar. The details are many, and it is difficult to keep track of the differences from one offering to another. There are no less than 5 general types of offerings listed in our parsha. A burnt offering of an animal, a burnt offering of flour, and usually oil, a peace offering, a sin offering, and a guilt offering. The subtle difference between the sin and guilt offerings need not concern us in this brief overview. These offerings and a few others served the personal and communal needs of showing dedication to God and of finding a means of personal atonement for whatever was deemed a sin. An animal offering had to be of a specific species, age, sex, and in unblemished condition. It had to be ritually slaughtered and dismembered in a specific way. Blood had to be sprinkled on various parts of the altar, or else the offering was invalid. The animal may have been completely burnt on the altar, or certain parts may have been eaten by either the priests or the person who brought the offering. Flour offerings were usually mixed with oil and cooked in a specific process. They were then also burnt on the altar. Both of these general types of offerings may have been accompanied by libations of wine or oil. There may have been incense offerings on another altar to complete the process. If anything went wrong any step of the way, the whole thing was irrevocably invalid and had to be done again from scratch. From the Bible, it seems that this entire institution was considered absolutely essential for the spiritual and physical well-being of both individuals and the entire nation. Although there were times when the temple was not serving this function adequately, and there were also alternate places to accomplish all this, the system as a whole was extremely central to biblical beliefs and spiritual needs. It was simply impossible to imagine life without some means of appeasing the divine power that controlled so much of life. Everything from the weather to the food supply, from birth to death, from fate to personal choice, was somehow linked with this complex ritual system. To do without it was not much different from a nation in modern times abandoning its entire economic and social system. There is no question that all of this is pretty much completely incompatible with the modern mindset. Who today could possibly imagine that economic prosperity or health or one's fate in life was connected with the types of sacrificial offerings that are brought in some central shrine? It almost invariably strikes the modern mind as utterly antiquated or even primitive. If anyone saw their neighbor doing something along these lines, they would probably call the police to report some sort of satanic ritual going on that could only be evil and barbaric. The truth is that even contemporary Orthodox Jews who read about this system every year and may even study the laws and rituals in great depth are frequently struck by a sense of cognitive dissonance over the totally alien feeling of the whole thing. This is a well-known problem in contemporary Judaism. Nobody really cares all that much about it since there is no temple for sacrificial offerings, so it isn't really a relevant issue. But everyone knows that the problem is there. The familiar custom of praying for the restoration of the temple with the offerings strikes at the core of this problem. If we really cannot relate to this whole system, why are we praying for it? Traditional responses to this are finding ways to make the sacrifices more relevant and not so ancient and primitive sounding. This is done by attaching either philosophical, spiritual, or mystical meaning to it all. While these noble attempts may solve the problem for some, they do not do so for all. Perhaps the only way to really deal with this problem is to recognize that the modern world is not the same as the ancient world. We prefer to deal with life through various combinations of science, technology, common sense, and personal beliefs. We tend to feel that with the tools that we have available, we can meet any challenge. We are aware of the shortcomings of this outlook, but we have to maintain it nevertheless. Whatever inner demons we may have to face as a result of this, we can either deal with or try to ignore. In any case, since nobody else knows about our demons, we can frequently put them on the back burner. Perhaps the sacrificial offerings filled in this gap in the distant past. Although it may not make all that much sense to us today, they may have been onto something. There were so many things that were unknown and uncontrollable that reliance on a divine power for guidance through life was downright essential. Having a belief that this divine power could be appeased by sacrificial offerings was a major step towards feeling that one had done one's part in making life a little easier to handle. This belief was a kind of reality to the ancient Israelites, so it was real to them as medicine or air conditioning are to us. Perhaps it was not such a terrible idea to have an organized system to rid oneself of inner demons. Those real or imagined thoughts, words, or deeds are the private burdens we must bear in life. An offering was a way to expiate them and to put them to rest to some degree. This is something severely lacking in much of modern life, and there doesn't seem to be any universal mechanism for actualizing inner peace. While relatively few people openly advocate the renewal of sacrifices to achieve this long-sought goal, it may very well be the case that we have nothing better in our toolbox. Sacrifices do seem barbaric, and it is not easy to really long for their restoration. It is a little reassuring to read a parsha like this and to believe that this was something done in ancient times that we no longer need or want. But on the other hand, who really knows if maybe they had something that we cannot access? They had a way to find peace with the hidden and mysterious power that guides the world. Do we have such a path? Shabbat Shalom.